Okay, we are recording. Sasha, how are you today?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Um, Sasha, before we get on with your playlist, I want to ask you to cast your mind back to the sort of 17, 18 months of lockdown, uh, and tell me how that time affected you both personally and creatively.
Well, I was actually making two and a half records during the time. I started with the In Dub album in late 2019. I finished that up in the summer of 20. And then I jumped straight on with Lucia to help her produce her solo album. And then I started Hyena. So personally, it really didn't affect me very much at all. What sucked was that we had to move tours that were planned forward and forward and forward, and you know, absolute total lack of income. Like there was nothing happening at all. So yeah, we just sort of eked it out here and kept busy.
Yeah. And do you find like did you put sort of pressure on yourself when as a musician, as a touring musician, life's busy, and then all of a sudden when the brakes get put on stuff like that, and you have time at your disposal, do you think, right, well, look, this is a well-deserved break now. I'm gonna rest up. I'm gonna put my feet up, or do you put a lot of pressure on yourself to like, well, look, I've got time now. I can create stuff. I can really maximize the time that I've got here, and get stuck in the studio. How much pressure do you put on yourself to produce music and create?
Well, the pressure on me is not really like where if I were in a band, because I've been working for decades with people that are in different locations, and we're just exchanging files, and I put the stuff together in my studio. So it wasn't really there wasn't really much pressure, and I'm not the kind of guy that sits in front of Netflix all day long. So I
Yeah,
have to do something, and especially during that lockdown, it was relatively free from external influences. I didn't see people. There was no parties, no barbecues, no get-togethers and drinking games and stuff. So it was actually a pretty productive time. Yeah,
cool.
in hindsight. I mean, it sucked, but I think I made the best of it.
Yeah. Well, let's start your playlist. And for track one, Sasha, I'm going to ask you please to tell me the song that you regard as having the greatest ever intro.
The greatest ever intro has to be DIY by my own band KMFDM. To my own horn here.
it's it's a big intro, isn't it? It's very grand.
It's bombastic.
Um,
Have you
when
done that?
you're creating and you're writing songs, um, when KMFDM first started, the way that people would get their music was very different to how people get their music now. My first KMFDM music was on vinyl, and then CD, and now we're looking at that young people and not just young people are now getting their music through all the streaming services, obviously, but we're seeing apps like TikTok and that being used, and bands being used on TikTok, and that affecting record companies' decisions as to what could potentially be singles, what could be a band to sign because they've got X amount of hits on this or
Right.
Shazam and all them things. The question I want to ask you, Sasha, is all of these kind of things that are now how people consume their music and get it, and it feels like so much of it is focused around on hooking them quickly and getting that little TikTok thing or getting on that Spotify playlist. And there's so much music out there now that it feels that there's pressure to grab someone quickly, and an intro is obviously key to that. How much of that has filtered through into your creative process, if at all?
It hasn't really played much of a role in my process at all because KMFDM has been around for so long. And we're basically preaching to the converted anyways. I mean, we do not see any expansion of our fan base.
Yeah.
It's basically a closed club. So it doesn't really affect me much at all. But I'm seeing it with my daughter. She's 14 right now, and she's completely with TikTok and all that stuff, and grabbing all the trends as they come by, and but yeah, I guess that's I mean, I didn't grow up with my brain and a sort of device in my back pocket, so
Yeah.
it's it's a totally different generation nowadays.
Yeah, totally. Okay, well, I'm going to ask you for track two, please, Sasha, to tell me the first song that you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you, please.
That would have been Miriam Makeba, Pata Pata. It was a song that was played in my house all the time when I was a kid, and my father was like a dealer with exotic art, so we had a lot of people from Africa come into the house, and they brought music and records, vinyl, obviously. So, but Miriam Makeba was my favorite, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a beautiful track, that. Tell me about home. Where was home growing up, and was it a musical house?
It was musical in the sense that my parents listened to music a lot, but nobody really played music. I grew up in Hamburg, Germany, and well, we had a piano, and I guess there was like a guitar sitting somewhere. There were a lot of African instruments, mainly drums and little recorders, like with the little ding ding dong, ding dong
Yeah,
stuff. So I played around with all kinds of instruments, and then I built my first bass guitar when I was maybe 10, with a pair of headphone as the pickup, and a headphone magnet with a couple of nails, and it had like two strings, and so that was my first homemade instrument.
I mean, that's pretty incredible at 10 years old to kind of put something like that together. Was you a really sort of creative kid?
Yeah, I think I was pretty good in the workshop. So, my grandfather had like this little shed with all the stuff inside it, and I could just make stuff there.
Yeah.
Like use wood, use paint and whatnot. And so yeah, just I used every opportunity I had to make stuff, to create objects or play around with things with wires and stuff. Like there was an oscilloscope that was really fascinating to me. Um, and that's really how my love for music started. When I first saw synthesizers, I was like, holy shit, this is what I need to get into.
Yeah.
But the stuff was so expensive back then, of course.
Yeah.
It was impossible.
And would that have been German synthesizer music?
Well, yes, I think the first time I heard synthesized music was Switched on Bach, which was what? Was it Wendy Carlos? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So, just the sounds like on television, science fiction movies and stuff, like these weird sounds. I was like, what kind of instruments are these? So there was like an early fascination with electronically synthesized sound. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I want to talk about school. And for track three, I'd like you to tell me the song that reminds you of your time at school, please, Sasha.
School's Out by Alice Cooper, of course. Still one of my favorite songs, actually.
Tell me about school. Was it something you enjoyed?
No, it was. I was completely useless in school, and school was really useless to me. Everything I learned later in life. I was just like always the joker in class, and I spent more time probably facing the corner than facing the teacher.
Yeah. Did you know what you wanted to be when you was at school?
I had no idea.
So, was music or art or anything sort of creative, like, was that ever encouraged at school?
It wasn't so far that we had a teacher who once asked the class, I guess he asked all his classes, there was a bit of a budget and how to spend it. And I convinced him to buy a Moog synthesizer. So that was great. And before that, he lent me a drum kit for about 3 or 4 months. So I had a drum kit in my house, and then this Moog synthesizer, and the possibilities were absolutely endless. I mean, it was crazy good.
Tell me about that, because I'm just a little younger than you, and I missed that kind of moment, you know, of I guess sort of affordable synthesizers. Obviously, they're very expensive. Um, Tell me about what it was like to get your hands on a fucking Moog synthesizer as a young lad. It must have literally been like this thing had just been beamed down from space, right?
It was incredible. I mean, I just plugged it in and plugged a speaker into it and just hit the keys, and it was just like, wow. You could turn everything, every knob, flip the switches, and you had no idea what would happen next. And of course, I never read the manuals of anything. I always go like hands-on. My parents were like, completely shocked about the stuff, the constant noise I created, day and night pretty much. But they encouraged me, so that was good.
Yeah, yeah. Did you have like a circle of friends that were like-minded?
Not really. Most of the kids I hung out with, they sort of wanted to build fires outside and play in some ruins or something, or build tree houses. I was more like the guy that I had a balance between liking to be alone and liking to be with friends. I mean, I wasn't a nerd per se, but I had my own interests. Like,
Yeah. Already sort of, being at school and experimenting with Moog synthesizers and drums, and I built a bass guitar. Did music seem like it was a legitimate option for a career? Did it feel like you could, coming from where you came from, did you feel like, oh, I could make a career from music? Or did that seem like, no, that's what people on the TV do?
no, because I never really mastered an instrument. I mean, a synthesizer, everyone can master a synthesizer. That's nothing. But I mean, I can't really play the guitar. I can't really play the bass all that great. I cannot play piano. So this sort of lack of, or the realization of a lack of ability in that sense, did not let me sort of explore that possibility. It was, however, in 1977, I guess, early 1977, when I first heard punk rock, that I realized there is maybe a future for me. This whole sort of thing, like the empowerment of people that had absolutely no idea how to play an instrument, but just looking great and shouting great stuff at the audience. And, that was just like the liberating moment for me.
Yeah. But do you think, as with what they had at their disposal, whether it be the Damned, the Pistols, the Clash, whatever, and I probably lean more towards maybe the sort of Pistols and the Damned. Like, they had that sort of DIY culture of like, right, look, we can play limited chords here. We've got, but the attitude is off the scale. We've got something to say. Do you think that was the similar sort of punk ethos could be said to things like Kraftwerk and things like, the early sort of synth bands that were coming through on the turn of the 70s into the early 80s? It was like, right, we can afford one synthesizer. We're not trained pianists, but we can make these sounds. Do you think that's as punk as what was coming out of London in 77?
That's a very interesting question. I was just reading a very good book about the what they call the krautrock area, sort of in general. And I learned from reading that book that the guys in Kraftwerk, they were complete nerds. They were like flutists and whatnot, and they were musically so overtrained in a way that that's what they did. Whereas other bands, like for instance, Cam, they were like, they had this total punk rock attitude to it. Absolutely the same thing. But I was, when Cam came out, I was maybe like 9 or so. So that really wasn't the music that first really touched me. I discovered krautrock much later than probably around the late 70s.
Yeah.
And then when the whole new German wave started, that was so deplorable that I just couldn't listen to it at all. So I don't know. I played in a school band, like in a band that we formed at school when I was maybe 11 or 12, and I played the bass. And then I just jammed around with people for like years, and I just knew one thing: I never wanted to be jamming ever again with people in a room. And you know, if I were to make music, I would make it on my own terms. And for the lack of talent that I have, I would, you know, work with people that have more than just talent. You know?
It's really weird that you say that, and you say that, you know, you wasn't a talented musician, but I think there's a lot to be said for a lot of artists that on paper aren't incredible guitarists or drummers. I think a real valid skill is having that idea and the fucking drive to make it happen.
That's
You know,
exactly, yeah.
and be that person in the band that goes, right, I've got this idea. I need a sound that sounds like this. And then once we've got this, I'm now going to make this happen. I am going to, you know, just to sort of, you know, early on in bands, you know, you need to have someone that can go, right, we've got this. Now I'm going to take it to a record label. I'm going to arrange a tour. I'm going to book this gig. You need somebody that's what they bring to the table. And that is as valid, if not more valid, than being able to play a fucking Pink Floyd solo. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's me. I mean, that's, you know, I mean, I worked with people in the past that were absolute brilliant musicians, but could not write a song by themselves. So I know what you mean. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I went and brought a cassette with me to some kind of record company, and boom, we got money to, you know, record more stuff. And I was the one that loaned money from the bank to go to America for the first time. And, you know, so yeah, it always takes the guy that drives the whole boat and, you know, a really good crew. I mean, one cannot exist without the other.
Absolutely. You just mentioned something there that I'm really curious to know about. Tell me about that first tour of America. How was that?
We had absolutely no idea what we were in for. And
when was it, Sasha?
When was it?
Yeah.
It was late 1989.
Right.
Yeah, December 89. We opened for Ministry, and it was probably one of the most rock and roll type of tours the world has ever seen. I mean, there were people being flambéed in their bunks. There was every drug on the planet on those tour buses. It was just absolutely, you know. And then we had no idea who Ministry was. When I got invited to that tour, I went to a record shop and I got one of their singles, and it was like really sort of synth poppy kind of stuff, you know. And then we show up in Chicago, and there's like 4 guitarists, 2 drummers, and they're hard as nails. And so we had prepared like a toned down set, you know, because we didn't want to be like so heavy with a synth pop band as the opener. So, you know, we threw our set out and played our regular shit, and people loved it. I mean, KMFDM became pretty much a household name in the industrial rock, Wax Trax Records kind of circles overnight. Yeah, you can really say that.
Tell me about the first song you remember buying from a record shop, Sasha.
The first record I bought, was it T-Rex? I think it was T-Rex. Yeah.
Yeah.
Get It On.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about, like, how much how much influence and how was you affected by, you know, kind of pre-punk, like just the kind of the glamour and the striking coolness of glam, you know, artists like T-Rex and Bowie and Roxy, like how much of that sort of filtered through into you?
It was like looking at a unicorn, basically. You know, you couldn't believe your eyes. Like what? You know, David Bowie. I mean, fucking unbelievable, unbelievable. It's just how do you become someone like that? You know, that was always the question in my head. But no, like I said, I realized the whole punk rock thing that was much more within reach for me, um, and it worked. So yeah, good.
Tell me about record shops for you though, as you got older and you know your love of music developed even further. Like, were record shops important places for you growing up?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
As you was getting older and your taste in music were getting, you know, more interesting and developing more, were record shops like interesting places for you?
Yeah, I would buy records just judged by the cover. I mean, it was totally, you know, if I liked the cover, I would buy it. And that was many years later. That was one of the uh, genius kind of decisions I made, which I didn't realize that they were genius. I realize it now, to stick with one guy to illustrate all the KMFDM covers throughout the years, you know, because I hear so many people telling me that the first KMFDM record they just bought because they liked the cover, because it was striking, it screamed out at them. And you know, it's like if you go into a bar and you see your favorite liquor on the shelf, you just instantly have the idea that's what I'm going to have, you know, or whatever. It's just branding. It's branding, and it totally works. So yeah, I bought stuff that I liked just by looking at it, and discovered like music in a very kind of broad spectrum that way. And I must say, I never had a narrow kind of taste in music. I listened to everything from, like I said, from African tribal music even to, you know, to heavy metal, to age kind of stuff, punk rock and roll, everything. It's nowadays I'm meeting a lot of people that are just very strict in their, you know, categorization of musical genres. I find that not very appealing, I must say. I mean,
They're missing out. They're missing out. There's so much good shit out there. Go explore it.
right. I mean, with KMFDM, we're not just like an industrial rock band. I think there's so much more in KMFDM, in the influences that make KMFDM's music, that it's kind of easy to spot. But still, reviewers often, you know, are so like, oh, this is digital hardcore, and this is, oh, this is kind of cyberpunk, and this is kind of this and this, you know. But when the sum of it is so much more, I mean, you know, you can have a punk rock song with a solo that could have been played by John Lord from Deep Purple, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what we did on this album. Stuff like crazy combinations. And I like to experiment with music, and it's so easy to always do the same. However, that's, you know, something that I'm often told as well. Like if it's KMFDM, you can immediately tell that it's KMFDM. But well, that's maybe good. I don't know. Maybe that's a good thing.
For track 5, I'm going to ask you to tell me the song that soundtracked your year's clubbing.
I'm sorry.
Track 5, I'm going to ask you for the song that soundtracked your year's clubbing.
Oh, the clubbing years. That was definitely Planet Rock was my all-time favorite. Africa Bombada.
What a record that is.
Fucking hell, man.
Can you remember the first time you heard that?
Yes, I probably can. It was at a club on the Reeperbahn here in Hamburg. That was called Shave or Aftershave or something. And I became friends with the DJ. He came from New York, and it was like a guest DJ, and he had just brought Planet Rock out. It must have been 1980, probably winter of 79 or 80. I'm not sure entirely when that came out, but it was so fresh, and everybody was just like shocked, and yet, you know, the dance floor just went boom, and everybody just freaked out. It was so good.
Yeah, that's something special, that record. And I guess, like, could you, how much of that scene, that early kind of electro hip hop scene, like how much of that kind of made its way into your record collection and your influences? Because obviously, you know, you can trace back Planet Rock and so much of what, you know, is on that record to Germany. But just that whole kind of utilization of, you know, of electronic music, and then later sampling and obviously the hip hop, and you know, aggressively having something to say. How much of that filtered through into your influences?
Loads of it, definitely. I mean, there was a point in time where I distinguished between sampleable music and non-sampleable music, and obviously these really sparse kind of early, like Africa Bambaataa type of songs, you know, where you can just sort of really cleanly sample a beat out of it, or the fact that they, you know, stole the little loop from Kraftwerk, and that all played like a huge role in my musical evolution for sure. And I mean, having a sampler was just, it was fantastic. It was,
Yeah.
KMFDM would have never begun without having a sampler, that's for sure.
I'm going to take you home for track 6, and a favorite song from an artist from your home county, please.
That would be You Going by Einstürzende Neubau.
Tell me about what you like about that record.
Well, I'm friends with a couple of the guys in the band, and Mark Chung came back to Hamburg from recording in London, and he brought Yu Gung back, and I listened to it, and I was like, holy fuck, how did you do that? That is so incredibly precise, and that's when I was introduced to the sampler, really. Yes. Yeah.
How did that impact on you? Like that hearing that sampling and hearing that and having that, holy fuck, how have you done that? Do you find that that's an inspiration? Do you find that kind of can be defeatist and just think, shit, man, how have they done that? Like, I need to do that. Or does that fire you up to go, right, what can I do with what I've got? I need to up my game now, and I've got to, you know, how does that impact on you?
It totally fired me up. I mean, I was like, yeah, this is what I need. And, you know, the next day I bought a sampler. So I just borrowed money and bought a sampler, and that was it. You know, I was hooked.
Wonderful, wonderful. For track 7, and it's your last track, Sasha, I'm going to ask you to be a tastemaker here, and I'm going to ask you, please, to tell our listeners a song that you think many may not have heard that you want them to hear.
That's a very good question there. I would say The Liquidator by the Harry J. All-Stars.
What a record.
That is such a weird song. And I was just listening to it the other day, like by accident, really. I dug out my reel-to-reel and popped on a tape that I recorded with my little brother back in 1970, the UK Hit Parade. And there was like raindrops keep falling on my head, followed by the Liquidator. I was like, what the fuck? And then came Rolling Stones, Jumping Jack Flash, you know.
Three great records on the bands.
I have a stack of tapes like this big. We just, every Saturday we recorded the Top of the Pops and whatever came on the radio. And my brother died a couple of years ago, so I inherited the tapes. And at first I was like, what is that? What is on these tapes? And then, good stuff.
Wonderful, wonderful. What we do is we put together a little Spotify playlist, Sasha, so people can go and listen to all of your song picks. And obviously we'll put some KMFDM music on there as well. With that in mind, you mentioned tours having to be rescheduled and records being made over lockdown. What's happening with the band right now and what's coming up?
Well, we're just 2 weeks away from starting our next US tour. Lucia just came down with COVID, apparently. I'm just hoping that I get it myself as well, so that I don't have to deal with it whilst on the road. Then we're going to be touring again in the spring in the US as well, maybe Australia. There'll be European dates in the fall next year, and of course, recording new stuff. Always thinking ahead.
Wonderful. And if people want to keep up to speed with everything that's happening, where's the best place to follow KMFDM?
That would be Sasha Konietzko on Facebook, I guess. That would be my personal page. That's always updated. And there's a bunch of kind of groups that are more or less about KMFDM. Just, just Google around. I mean, websites are like not really the thing anymore today. So I guess it's all Twitter and Instagram. Yeah. I think I find KMFDM on pretty much every platform.
Wonderful. Well, we'll tag you in it and Lucia as well. Sasha, it's been really nice talking records with you. Thank you so much.
Likewise, Stu. Very much.
I'm just going to press stop.